Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm your host, Danette Martin, and I hope that today's conversation will expand your knowledge. Today I welcome my mom, Danette Martin, to the show. Mom is one of the most talented and creative people that I know, and for as long as I can remember, she has loved to use these gifts to encourage and share with others. Two specific loves that she has are writing and teaching. And in this conversation, she talks a little bit about each of those, how they allow her to be creative and what she's learned from her experiences with trying to develop her creativity, especially in these two areas. Also, throughout my life, Mom has always liked to get me to think by prompting me with good questions or sharing with me the things that she's thinking about. And so for that reason, it didn't surprise me at all that we got into philosophizing a little bit in this conversation and talking a little bit about why things are the way they are, and also a little bit about how different things within creativity work. I really enjoyed having my mom on the podcast, and I hope that you too will enjoy this conversation and learn from her expertise. Welcome, Mom, to the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm really excited to have you here and talk to you for the next little while.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what keeps you busy? What's life like for you right now?
Well, the first thing I thought of was to do with homemaking, so domestics for sure, cooking, cleaning, laundry. And then I thought a lot about relationships.
Okay.
How much of what I do during a day has to do with relationships. Of course, with my husband, Ken. And sometimes I get involved with his work. Not very often as far as physically going to where he works. And then writing to my two daughters who are at a distance and things like that. Also, one of my daughters is in college, Kara, and she sometimes has me edit some of her work.
Oh, okay, nice.
And so, that will take some time out of my day, but I love it.
Did I have you do that when I was in school? I don't think I did very often, did I?
I don't recall it being often. Okay. No, she and I actually exchange editing work.
Oh, okay. So she'll edit some of your stuff too.
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad she's taking advantage of that from you.
Yeah. And then, of course, being a grandma is just a really great part of my life. And so that takes up some of my day sometimes when I babysit your son, Seth. And that's a very fun part of my work.
Yeah, he loves to come here too. And now that he's just old enough that he's starting to understand things that we say to him, at least some of the things that we say to him. And so his face lights up when we tell him that he's going to Grandma's place, or when we get here and he recognizes it. So that's been a lot of fun to see him interact with you and really enjoy it. And we're really thankful that you're willing to help us out with babysitting when we need it too sometimes. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. I also like to host people. It gives me great joy to get ready to have company come and then to host them when they're here. And that hasn't been happening much during COVID. So that's, I will like when that picks up again.
And hopefully, I don't want to make any predictions, but maybe it won't last too long anymore. Maybe there's hope on the horizon. So hopefully life will be back to normal as far as that goes before too long. As far as hosting, is that something that you've always enjoyed, or at least as long as I've been around? Is that something that you would say has always been something you've taken a lot of pleasure in, or is it developed more more recently?
I would say I've always enjoyed it. But it's become more pleasurable to me the more that I've learned how to not allow it to be so much pressure.
Okay. So. And is that not worrying so much about how it comes across, or what do you mean by the pressure of it?
I think so. Just being okay to have it turn out as it does and not stress.
Yeah.
Also to how the house looks
Okay.
before people come.
So you're less worried about that now,
Less
or it's
worried.
is it easier to have it looking good with young children around?
Well, both, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, were you still saying a few things that you're busy with or that you do?
Oh, yeah. One more thing about relationships is that I do some mentoring. I
Okay.
would call it very informal mentoring, but there's an elderly lady from the city that I meet with weekly. We usually go on a walk when we're together.
Okay. Yeah.
And so just doing life with her, finding out about her, what's going on with her. And so that takes up, what makes me busy too, but I enjoy that.
Excellent. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about that you do writing and with that, and you have other projects I know all along that throughout my life you're often have things on the go, whether it's personal hobbies or more bigger writing projects, other things that you're working on. So do you have creative projects like that right now on the go, or what's that like?
Yes, I have a blog. It's called Danny's Discoveries, and I'm not regularly publishing something on there, let's say like every week.
Okay.
It's more when I get inspired to publish something there. But I'm often taking note of things that might work for a blog post. And I might be taking notes on that or taking pictures. I enjoy adding photography to my blog posts. And I am working on a book currently.
Okay.
It's the story of someone who grew up in El Salvador, and it's about his journey to this area. And this person is kind of like my husband's foster brother in a way, or brother from another mother, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how he says.
Very good. Just with that, where kind of are you in that process, like in your writing project there? Where are you in the process of, I mean, if between the spectrum of starting it and finishing it, kind of where are you at this point?
Well, I figure that the book will have 20 some chapters.
Okay.
And I'm currently in chapter 17.
Okay.
So it's nearing the end,
Yeah.
which feels really good because this has been a years long project.
Yeah. Will that be like just finishing the writing and then there'll be lots of rewriting and editing after that? Or have you been doing that all throughout as well?
I've been editing as I go along with a writers group that I'm with.
Okay.
And I'm sure there'll be lots of revision
Yeah.
after I get the initial writing done.
Yeah. Are you trying to keep it as factual and as true a story as you can, or are you taking is it based on a true story and you're writing a story along those lines?
I'm keeping it as factual as I can, and that's actually probably the biggest challenge in writing this book is keeping those facts straight and getting together with the individual and getting the details and then putting them into my own words. And so
writing it in a compelling way while keeping it true. And it's not like any story. I mean, we think about good storytellers, and I think that we talk about people that have interesting stories happen to them, it seems, all the time. But I think some people are just really good at noticing what's around them and being really good at telling a story about regular life that happens to them or remembering really interesting things and being able to bring that out. And so there is a skill in taking a compelling story and being able to present it in a compelling way. Like those two things don't just hop. A compelling story doesn't necessarily come out in a compellingly written book, right?
that is so true.
Yeah. So I'm sure that takes a lot of work to be able to do that well. I'm looking forward to reading it once you have it completed. Anything else that you wanted to say on that or other writing projects that you're doing?
I don't think I have really any other writing projects that I'm doing, but I think about along the lines of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I try to put my personal touch into whatever I do.
Okay.
So just recently, I sent a birthday card to an 11-year-old whom I don't know, but I've had connection with her mom through our writing interests.
Okay.
And so this 11-year-old has epilepsy, and the mom was asking for people to send birthday cards to this daughter. And so I got this card ready, and the thought just came to me that I could put a little activity in this card for her. So really simple. I decided to write the girl's name 11 different ways.
Okay.
So cursive, printing, little curly cues, that sort of thing. And then I said that she can look at these and choose which is her favorite.
Oh, okay.
Just something a little special in the card, and I enjoy doing things like that.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And that reminds me of different things that you would have us do, especially when we were children. Like you said, your little personal thing that you would add to something we were doing. So just a few days ago, I was telling Joy about the time when we took a trip to the West Coast. We drove out, and so it was about a 3-week trip, and we stopped along the way at a number of friends and people that we knew along the way. We'd stop for a day or two at their place to visit them. And I remember that you came up with this whole thank you song for us to sing as to thank our hosts as just before we left. And I was telling Joy about this song. This part of the song had come into my mind or something, and so I was singing a little bit to her what I remembered of it. So that you talking about your personal adding your personal activity or your personal creativity to an activity reminded me of you having us do that on the way at each host place on our way out west.
That's funny, because I actually have that in my notes here.
Oh, you do? Okay,
that's
sorry.
one thing I thought of.
All right. So, yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with us doing this interview today that it popped into my mind, but
Okay.
it still sticks out to me. If you have other writing things to talk about, that's great. But I'm also curious if you have other hobbies or interests that you wanted to share.
I mentioned photography before.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur photographer, that's for sure, but I just really enjoy it.
Okay, that's great.
Finding things in nature. I like walking out in nature and finding things to take pictures of, and just finding unique frames, a unique way to take a picture, or unique objects or scenes. Really enjoy that.
Is that a really recent hobby for you? Like, I didn't remember that you were excited about photography or into it when I was young.
I think I've always enjoyed it somewhat.
Okay.
But when you were young, I would have done it more to document different activities and ages of you children
Yes.
and that sort of thing. I would say lately it's become more of a hobby for me. And about 2 years ago, I think it was, I got a more expensive camera and can do more things with it.
Yeah.
And that's helped to develop my interest in it too.
Yeah,
I
that's
think.
excellent. Is it something that you've just learned and experimented and figured out what you like on your own, or have you done some personal study or research on ways to develop skills and that with your photography?
I haven't done any training really with it. The only study that I've done has been, so when I got the camera, of course, there's instructions that come with it and also some videos, excuse me, that you can watch.
Okay.
And so I've done some of that, but not very much at all.
Okay. So
more
it's
trial and error.
yeah,
And
figuring out what you like and how to
Right.
achieve that. And-
Exactly.
oh, that's awesome. And yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing the the photography that you do now, and you sharing those pictures with us, but also seeing you incorporate it with your blog. That's neat that you can bring those two things that you love together in a blog format. I mean, it's powerful the way that technology has allowed us to share our creativity. Like, can you imagine 20 years ago being able to share your writing and your photography so easily like you can now? It's basically the click of a button once the work of formatting it's all done and things like that. So
That's right. That's a good point. It is really an asset to have that.
yeah. Any other hobbies or interests that you wanted to talk about?
I enjoy cooking and baking. And there again, I like to put special touches on my food that I serve. I don't always, but once in a while, I will just do something for fun. Like maybe when I'm going to take a dish to a potluck or family reunion or something for Easter. I remember one year I did a cheese ball in the shape of a Easter bonnet.
Oh, okay.
And so the ribbon on it was carrot, strips of carrot, and I think the flowers on it were vegetables. And
neat. Yeah.
things like that. I really enjoy doing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, I enjoy seeing those little things that you do as well. Yeah, if you think about more things that you want to share about yourself as we go along, that's great. But I think I'd like to hear a little bit about how you've come to the place that you are, how your creativity has developed, and kind of what's led to that. So my first question along those lines is, I don't even know if this is possible, but can you identify kind of where your creativity came from, or how it developed? I don't know if you can talk about if you know when it started, or what kind of has led you to enjoy creativity and to be a creative person.
Well, I found this a fascinating question to ponder. Because where really does creativity start in a person? For me, it's like it's always been there.
Okay.
And I really think that because I was made in the image of God, that is a reflection of him, actually, to be able to create things. And even with that, I feel like he has done the creation, and what I am doing is discovering what he's put in me.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think of it more that way.
Yeah, I really like that.
And thinking back to where I got the creativity or developing it, another thing I thought of is that along with that discovery is that there have been things that I have done in life where I think, oh, this just feels like what I was made for. You kind of, I don't know, maybe one term is you get in the zone. And so like when I'm teaching, for instance, and I catch on that what I have taught is actually connecting with someone, with a student, that just feels so good and right to me. And I think, oh, this is what I was made for. And so I think that is an example of creativity coming out.
So it's I don't know if you're talking about, are you just talking about enjoyment or joy in something, or is it something even deeper or broader than that? Like, I'm just trying to think here is when you talk about that, you really feel like you were made for that or something like that. Can it be described as an enjoyment, enjoying what you do, like in any type of job, or what you're doing, like whatever you're doing, is that a sign that that's what you were made to do, what God made you to do, created you to do, or
Yeah, I think maybe it's a sign that that's what you're creative in.
Okay, yeah. And there's vastly different types of creativity, I think.
Oh, I know, yeah. That's what I've been finding in thinking about this too, is that I look at myself as a creative person, but someone else who has very different interests than I do and abilities and skills could also be a creative person, even if they don't enjoy writing or some kind of art.
Yeah.
Often we think of creativity as being more artsy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think about myself as I think it interesting sometimes when I compare your interests and hobbies and the things that you're really good at to who I've turned out to be. And I wonder, like, I'm so different from that. Like, I don't really enjoy those more artsy things that you're describing, where I would much rather study science or teaching. But I've also found ways that requires creativity and
Definitely.
yeah. So I think that what you're talking about, I can somewhat identify too, with, just in maybe a different field or different things that I enjoy or have found to be my gifts and talents. So yeah, it's interesting to think about the things you're talking about from my perspective too.
I also thought of my parents. I wonder if they're, I don't know, is there a creative gene actually that's passed along? I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I don't know, and we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later with some of the questions that we have. But are there things that you can pick out that they did to help you develop some of these creative ways of thinking or develop your creativity?
Well, certainly when I look at my dad, I think of his precision. The way he prepares to eat a bowl of cereal, for instance.
Okay.
It's just, he has the right amount of milk, and he'll scrape down the sides of his bowl, and that picture is his precision and detail. He enjoys detail. So those types of things, I think, were passed on to me either by example, me watching him, or I don't know if it is actually passed on genetically.
Yeah.
And then with my mom, she was not as detailed and artsy as my dad, but she was very much a teaching person, really enjoyed discovery.
Okay.
And so taught me to enjoy nature, for instance, by her love of it and passing that on to us children.
And she would invite you along on those discoveries?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
very much. Making charts of, the different flowers that we found in the spring or that sort of thing. And I'd say she was a good communicator.
Okay.
She wrote some articles and 2 books, I think, about family.
Okay. So she
stories.
enjoyed writing. And
She did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And I also think of, at least in the development of creativity, I think about my twin sister, Annette. So both of us have similar interests and abilities. And so that helped me to develop creativity.
Okay.
Because, well, it was also a source of comparing and contrasting each other because we were always experiencing the same things together.
Yeah.
But it was a challenge, like kind of a competition sometimes. And that encouraged me to develop my creativity. And also she's my number one encourager in my writing and that sort of thing, because we understand each other well and we can sort of critique each other well and encourage each other.
Yeah.
Very much.
Well, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about what that would bring, having that constant companion all throughout your childhood. So you mentioned the competition part of it, but yeah, the encouraging part of it must go so far too if you have that. Even if I don't know if you experienced this as a child or still do, but I would find so often that I would get so excited about something that I'm starting or project that I'm trying still now deal with this, that after a little bit of working on it, it can wane. And
yes,
if you can run into the first hurdle or the first barrier, and it's so easy to drop that. So I wonder if having Annie by you all the time, if that helps to kind of encourage, but also makes you want to keep going because of the competition part of it. And yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I wonder if that's kind of helps spur you on for those projects as you're growing up and things like that. Any thoughts on if that would be part of it, or?
Well, I really think it was and is a part of it for me.
Yeah.
There can be things that you need to work against too. Like
Okay.
I think of, because of our competition, we maybe learn to be performance driven, and there's the perfectionism thing that I suppose any creative person needs to work with in some regard, but definitely the companionship,
Yeah.
like you said, that is a good aspect of it.
Yeah, excellent. Any other things that you picked out as what helped develop your creativity?
No, I think that's about it for that.
So, yeah, I guess my next question here is thinking now, but also, yeah, I guess the next question kind of gets that too. But some of the hobbies, some of the projects that you've done throughout your life, or that you're working on, what are some of those things that have helped to develop that creativity, or ways that you've showed that creativity?
Are you kind of thinking like all through life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed art class at school, especially when we did not so much drawing, but maybe designing things or coloring in different shadings or anything along those lines. And I always enjoyed when that art was displayed and I could look at it and have other people see it. And my mom had us children do a lot of crafts.
Okay.
And she taught how to embroider and knit and crochet, those kinds of things.
Okay.
And we used to get actually craft kits as gifts sometimes when I was a child. And I
okay.
didn't always want to see those through to the end.
Okay.
But she was one to make us finish them if possible.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think that was good for me to have that discipline to finish a project.
Yeah.
And then my mom got us to decorate cakes when my sister and I were growing up.
Okay.
And that was a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Nice.
And calligraphy. My mom had my sister and I sign up. I think she went with us actually too.
Okay.
Sign up for one class. I think it was an evening class at a store in town.
Okay.
And we went and learned the basic strokes of how to do calligraphy. And that just made me take off with calligraphy.
Okay.
I just loved it. And my mom found ways for my sister and I to use that calligraphy on family Christmas letters we sent out, and writing the names on napkins when we were getting ready for company.
Okay.
Like my mom would put the names of the guests on napkins at their place at the table.
Okay.
So people could go and find their place. And so she would have us do calligraphy on that.
Wow.
And just little ways like that, I think, helped to develop my creativity and show me that I had something to offer.
Yeah. That's great. Did you do any more classes, or was it just that one class? And
Just that one.
And then learned on your own from there? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating that well, I mean, that she took the time to sign you up for that. And I mean, obviously just one class, she wasn't forcing you to do it, but it was a way that you then found you loved it and were able to take off with it from there. So it's fascinating.
And one other area I think of is in teaching school. So I taught school for 4 years before I got married. And that's a huge way to display or showcase someone's creativity.
Yeah, plenty of opportunities within
Right.
that. And was it in ways that you would decorate your classroom, or did you find within your teaching that in teaching methods that there was lots of room for creative thinking and creative methods as well?
I would say both.
Okay.
I think of the bulletin boards that I did. Some of them were really fun for me. And also in just finding solutions for problems in teaching, and also figuring out a way to maybe use an object or illustration to connect with my students in what I was trying to teach them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, teaching for sure is I found too to be a way that there's lots of opportunity to think creatively, whether it's a student's not getting it, so is there another way that I can explain this, and think outside the box from how I would explain it, since that hasn't been working for the last 3 times that I've tried, or that kind of idea is where I often found that I needed to be creative, or it was beneficial to come up with creative ways. So did you find that as well, or?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and then writing is something that as long as I can remember you've done. Is that something that you started as a child or teenager as well, or where did the love of writing develop?
Sometimes it seems like I must have been born loving words.
Okay.
I learned to read when I was 4.
Okay.
So I can hardly remember not knowing how to read. And I've always had an interest in words.
I did not know that you read before you went to school.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Did your mom teach you, or your parents teach you, or did you learn on your own, or?
Well, Mom taught us, but as I remember the story, she said that my sister and I came to her with a book and said, "Teach us to read."
Oh, okay.
Like we wanted to.
Requested it.
Yeah. Oh. And so she got some early readers for us and taught us.
Okay.
I'm curious to know whether it was by memorization, or I don't think she taught phonics.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, as I'm thinking about it now, when I was in grade 2, we had started our own church school.
Okay.
And we would have used a reading program that used phonics.
Okay.
And we actually had phonics books, and I did not like doing them because I knew how to read, and why go back to figuring out what the sounds of the words were?
That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
So you don't really remember learning how to read, or do you remember that process?
Well, I remember actually having the books and being excited to read sentences to Dad when he got home from work. But I can't really remember life before reading.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you remember this, but I used to take like chapter books and run my eyes over every line, pretending I was reading, even though I couldn't do it. I don't know how I had the patience for that. But I think I went the entire way through Gentle Ben doing that.
Oh my!
And I guess seeing you reading, or from you reading to me, I guess I was fascinated by the process even before I knew how. But I remember learning in school then, from that process, and maybe like you. I think there was a reader that we had here that you would help me learn a few basic words from, but no, I remember the process of learning to read in school. It wasn't difficult for me, but and I picked it up quickly. But I definitely remember life before knowing how to read, or have some memories from that.
Wow, the whole book of Gentle Ben.
Yeah,
I'm still like.
I don't know how I did that or why, but
it
must have been an interesting child. So where did you start writing in school, or did you start writing before you were in school, or where did that begin?
Oh, it was probably assignments in school. Yeah. And then my mom would have us write thank yous to people, and this was back in the day when people actually wrote letters to each other.
Right.
And so we had pen pals and, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yep.
And when I was 8 years old, I think it was, I entered a poetry contest.
Okay.
And the prize for this contest was that you could pick out a book from this publisher.
Okay.
And so my sister and I each wrote a poem and sent it in, and we each won.
Okay.
I mean, there was probably a lot of winners.
Yeah.
But I remember this choice of picking out a book from this publisher and seeing all the possibilities in their catalog and thinking how great this was to be able to choose a book for the prize. And that was pretty heady stuff for an 8-year-old. And
Nice.
so things like that, I think, helped to develop my interest in writing. And my parents certainly showed a love for the written word.
Okay.
I remember Dad reading stories aloud to us. Uncle Podger Hangs a Picture was a story I remember. And another article about how the human eye works.
Okay.
And so that connection of hearing the written word in a family setting, and that I think that also helped to develop my love of listening to words and the way they're written, and then that translated into my enjoying writing, expressing myself.
Yeah.
And my mom loved songs and poems. I can
Okay.
still hear her recite some of the poems that she enjoyed or read them.
Okay.
And one that I didn't really like to hear her recite was something about who has heard the wind go ooh, and it was just so shivery to me.
Oh, okay.
But even in that, looking back, I see how she connected meaning to words and passed on that love of poetry and writing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, what writing projects did you do? Like, did you? So I had mentioned that as long as I can remember, you've been writing, or whether it's for our church fellowship publication and things like that. Is that something that you've done for even long before you were married and had children, or when did you start writing for publications or that kind of thing?
I think most of it has been after I'm married that I would have actually written for a publication.
Okay.
So I took a writing class when I was at Bible school.
Okay.
So I would have, I would have been required to write things, different styles
Right.
for that class. But I think it was after I was married that I started writing more in, like you say, the church publication. And also I was with a writers group,
Okay.
and some of that stuff I would have gotten published too.
Okay. So it was was it part of, did that encourage you to write things for this group? And then since you were writing things anyway, you decided to send them away to publishers, or was it your goal to get published in a magazine or something like that?
I think it was more that being with this group required me to write. And then we also learned some about sending your work away and getting it edited and published. And for a while I wrote for a homeschool magazine.
Oh, okay.
And also for a school magazine. So there were two different editions. And so I had to, I think it was every other month maybe, send an article.
Okay.
So that gave me discipline in getting things written and then learning how to work with editors and so on.
I see. So what made you decide to write a book then? Or how did that come to be?
Are you talking about the book that I'm currently writing?
No, sorry, I was talking about the one that you did with your twin sister about your mom, my grandma.
Yes. Well, that one definitely came about by us just wanting to share our story about. So my mom died from cancer 20 some years ago. And my sister and I wanted to write her story, and mostly about how she went through her cancer journey and that experience. And so we divided up the chapters in the book and decided that we were going to do this story together.
Okay. How long was it? Just after she died that you came up with this idea, or
Yeah, it was very shortly after she died that we decided to write the book.
Okay.
But it was a few years then until we actually got it done.
Right. And do you remember if was your inspiration for the book to try to inspire others, or was it to kind of help you deal with the loss and what you were going through through that time? Or maybe it's hard to know exactly what the motivations were.
I would say that the motivation was to process our own grief and experience of the story, and also to pass on to our children then, who were still to come,
Right.
in some cases,
Yeah.
the memory of her.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge motivation.
Would it have been
for it.
because, I mean, I was 4, I think, when she died. And so you both had just very young children, and there were children that were going to come later. So was it because we were so young that you wanted to have those memories and pass them on, since we never really got a chance to know her? Was that part of the motivation?
That was part of it.
Okay.
Part of it was too that she had a lot of friends and
Okay,
relatives who would enjoy hearing the story.
Yeah. And I hadn't thought about that part of it, but that's great. I just personally, this book has been printed for, 20 years now since it would have,
Yeah.
since you got it printed? Was it late 90s?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been on our shelf for as long as I can remember, and I've read parts of it, but it was just about a year ago. I don't know if you remember me telling you this, but I've
Yeah, I
finally
did.
picked it up and read it cover to cover, and it didn't take too long. It's not a super long book,
Right.
but it was really enjoyable to get to know her a little bit better from reading about it. But I also learned a lot about where you came from and kind of what your family life was, and it was fascinating to learn that about, kind of, since it was from where you came from, a little bit of from where I came from, and
Yeah.
what I learned from it too. So it was a fascinating read. Anything more that you wanted to say about that process, or are you glad you did it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work though, right?
Yes. And the part that probably is the hardest for me is to actually market the book. And like, it was self-published. And so, yeah, that part is an ongoing challenge, I would say, actually.
Was it your goal to try to sell as many as you could, or were you okay with just whoever was interested in it maybe buying one and ordering one? Or
Yeah, it's probably more who is interested in it. But I just found that I'm not really one to like go out there and promote and push what I've done. My sister and I enjoyed more the process of writing it and working together that way.
Yeah. So you did sell it, right? Like, you're not giving it away, or?
Oh, we sold it, yes.
Yeah. So did you cover the costs of
Yes, we
printing
did.
it? Okay.
Yes.
But I mean, probably not the amount of time that you spent on it. I'm guessing you wouldn't have covered that if you would pay yourself an hourly wage for it, or?
Oh, probably not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to think about that. In some ways it is a project or a hobby, or some ways like doing something like this. Like, I'm not planning to make any money from it, but I think it's good for me to talk with people and have a experience like this. So I was wondering if that's kind of how you saw it, as more a project, a hobby.
Yes, I think that's right. More than a market project, or
Right. Or something you're trying to make a living off of, or anything like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was more of a hobby and relational thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Anything else that you had prepared to share about your story, or things that have developed your creativity throughout your life?
I don't think so.
All right, then I'd like to ask you a few questions about what your process is for writing, how you think about, how you plan, how you come up with a creative piece of writing, or a creation of some kind. So yeah, try to describe a little bit what your process is for getting something from an idea onto paper.
Sure. So the first process is thinking. I don't know how many stories and articles I would have written in my mind.
Okay.
Like I just, try out different lines as I'm thinking about something. And so then I go from the thinking process to jotting things down. And for a long time in my writing, I would write them down longhand in a notebook, just scribble notes and so on. But in the past few years, I've moved more toward actually doing my note-taking on computer.
Okay.
So I'm not a fast typist by any means, but I can type fast enough that makes sense for me efficiently to do that scribbling part on screen.
And it doesn't hurt your creativity to do it on a screen like that versus writing it out?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I used to think it did.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
Okay, that's good.
So then, the scribbling, actually, I still do use the pen and take notes sometimes if I'm not by my computer or just want to quickly write something down. So then after actually typing things out, then there's a lot of revision. So I cut and paste and I delete and move things around a lot when I'm actually writing something. And then, so that can be a number of times that revision happens.
Do you do that as you're going through, or will you write a chunk or a paragraph and then play with that and then do the next paragraph? Or do you do a whole document and then go back and redo the whole thing?
Kind of depends.
Okay.
If I'm really inspired, I can sit down and write, several paragraphs or almost a whole article or something that I'm going to put on my blog, and then go back and figure it out. Other times it's more of it takes a while to get going, and I'll write something and I know it's just not the right feel. It's not saying what I want it to say.
Okay.
So I, move this part of the sentence around, or maybe to the last part of the paragraph, or that kind of thing.
Yep.
So I would say it varies. And then after I figure that I have it pretty much how I want it, I will send it to the editors in my writing group, or have someone else read over it. Sometimes I have Ken read over it. Sometimes I have Kara read over it, and sometimes I don't have anybody look at it. I'm my own editor, depending on what it is. If it's something that especially what I put on my blog, I wouldn't necessarily.
Okay, I was going to ask if you get that all looked at by someone else too, but not all the time.
No, it might depend on the type of article, or what I'm putting on.
Yeah.
If it's more of a description of an experience that I had personally, then I might not have someone else look over it.
Yeah.
And then I also like to have someone look over it for proofreading, like picking out typos and that kind of thing.
Because it's just hard to catch everything yourself, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
And I occasionally will find an error in a published book or something like that, and it's like, I wonder how many people this got by until if I would have just been part of that process, it would have been caught since I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to describe there as part of that process, or I guess hitting a publish or sending it off to an editor, is that the last step then?
Yeah, and then even after that, I might see a typo, like say in my blog post, for instance.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes people have actually pointed something out to me that's not a correct fact or something like that. And I
Okay.
can go back and change it for future people to read it on the
yeah.
blog anyway. Of course, when you send it to an editor for publication somewhere else, you can't go back and change it after it's in the magazine or whatever.
Right. But they might send it back to you with some changes or do some editing.
Oh, for sure.
Once you've sent it off at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to that beginning of that process where you talked about you spend a lot of time thinking of ideas, where do you get that inspiration, or is it something that just comes from within, or is it do you actually have ways that you look for inspiration or try to develop your ideas?
One of the first things I thought of when I read this question is that I heard a quote one time or read something that inspiration is kind of like leaves falling. And if you're lucky, one will land on your head.
Okay.
And so I think of inspiration as kind of that way sometimes, that I can't predict or make happen what will inspire me. And so sometimes an idea will just surprise me so much, because how did I think of that? Or where did it come from? But then other ways that I do actually look for inspiration would be, I like to take lessons from nature.
Okay.
Or even from human nature. And so observing what makes people do the things they do, and kind of human nature as a whole, that will give me inspiration.
Yeah.
And when I'm walking out in nature, sometimes that will give me an idea, things to write about.
And will you use that then sometimes as part of your blog or something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be an analogy or something like that you'll use.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else ways you get inspired?
Personal experience is
yeah.
something that gives a lot of ideas. And I like to ask myself questions when I read or hear a story. So if it's a story or an article that really jumps out at me as, this is so meaningful, or maybe I hear a story and there's something in it that just sparks something in me, or maybe I'll read something that it'll make me say, oh, that is delicious, when it's not about food at all. Or it makes me want to maybe hug myself with delight after I've read it. Or maybe I'll think, why didn't I write that? So then to notice those things and to ask myself what it is about that piece of writing or what I've heard that makes me feel this way.
Yeah.
And then to have that inform what I write.
Oh, yeah.
Then. So that can also be with the way it's written, but it can also be an inspiration. Like when I hear a story about someone else and they overcame a failure or something like that, that can give me an idea for maybe something in my life or something else that I see.
Yeah. I really like that thinking about how you're affected by the things that you read or what you hear or see, and then thinking about how you can use that same method or use that same thing to inspire others. I like that. Would you say that you feel a lot from the reading that you do, or try to really put feeling into your writing?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So I was thinking about what you were saying, and I think that's different than how I experience writing, or, I mean, when I read something, I don't do a lot of writing, but I wouldn't describe it as getting a lot of feelings. I, I do somewhat, but I think it's more processing ideas and thinking about things when I read more than feeling. I don't know if I've ever described something that I read as delicious.
So what would be a word that you would use to describe when you really enjoy or something is meaningful to you when you read it?
Probably something really clicks. Or I love seeing things in maybe a new light, like when I've read something that I didn't know before, and I love kind of having my ways of thinking change to be hopefully more correct, or to have a deeper understanding of truth from something that I read. So yeah, maybe that's something really clicked and made sense would be a way that I would describe it when I'm really inspired or really connect with something that's written. Mm-hmm. So would you connect, like, does that make sense to you, or is that totally different than what your experience is?
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
But it's interesting that you bring out the feeling part of it, because I would definitely say that my writing is it not feelings based, but that's a huge part of my writing is how it makes me feel.
Mm-hmm. Would you you maybe mentioned this a little bit, but do you really enjoy reading poetry and writing poetry?
I do.
Yeah, because that's really what poetry is designed to do, right? Is to give feeling, or more than just presenting ideas that you think about, like how the words sound together and the images that they give, or the feelings that the taste that it gives it through describing the words. Yeah, and poetry is just, I don't know, I think of it more of as a feeling type of thing. Would that be your experience too?
Yes, it is. But it's also interesting that you mentioned that you like when something gives you a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And so I think that poetry can also be that.
Okay.
It can give you a different angle of looking at something just by the way the words are chosen.
Okay.
The way it's put together.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that from with poetry. That's great. I'm not sure if you had other things to say about your inspiration, but maybe you did mention this, but how much does your reading how much does that play into inspiring you? Like, do you read and that gives you ideas of things that you could write about? I guess you kind of mentioned that as your...
Yeah. Also just being aware when I read. Especially I think about this in regards to how something is written. Like what about it affects me. Yeah. And so can I not necessarily copy that when I go to write something, but to have that in mind, what is it that I feel connects me to reading that I can put into my writing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Did you have other things that you wanted to say about inspiration?
I don't think so.
So what's your favorite type of writing to do?
This was actually a hard question for me. I enjoy description, and I love the challenge of making this piece, whatever I'm writing, say what I want it to say. So that can be in different types of writing.
Okay,
like some kinds of writing are sort of to teach somebody. So I enjoy that, and I also enjoy the personal experience stories where I can write out and describe something that happened to me or what I'm thinking about something.
Okay. Yep.
And when I'm writing about personal experience, if it can be unique or funny in some way, that's I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Do you have so kind of along with that, looking back, do you have a specific project or piece of writing that you did that you would say has been your favorite, or that you look back with that makes you feel like that was one of my best pieces or favorite pieces?
I don't know if this was my best piece, but certainly one of my favorite. And that was the blog that I had before my present blog.
Okay.
It was called Danny's Daily 1,000. And so it was a picture a day. And then I always wrote a little bit to describe the picture. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 2 full years. I never missed a day.
Wow.
And looking back on that was just a really, really fun project.
Nice.
And I tried to think about what makes it that way for me. And one was that it was daily. So it was a pattern that I got into, something to actually discipline. It brought discipline into it. And it was short. It wasn't very long, the description. Sometimes just a few sentences, sometimes a few paragraphs. But that kept it doable.
Yeah.
And then it was so creative because of the variety of the photos. And sometimes I would choose a photo that showed what I was doing that day, and sometimes just whatever I saw on the counter that day, or something exciting or surprising in nature. And it was just different from one day to the next. And so sometimes I even varied the way that I described it in the text.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah,
just really enjoyed that.
Lots of opportunities to put your personal touch on it, like you'd talked about before.
Right.
Is that still? Can people still find it? If is it still on the internet somewhere?
Yeah.
Like all those posts. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. That someone might want to check that out if they've never seen that. Did you say you did it for 2 calendar years? Or,
yes.
Okay. Which 2 years was it?
Oh, probably, I think it was 3 and 4 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay. So it's been that long.
Yeah.
Long ago that you did it. Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of wondering if you enjoyed it so much, why'd you stop, or was there a reason that did it feel like it was time to end it, or
Yeah, it's always time to end projects that.
It's not necessarily something that you could keep doing, or it might lose a little bit if you would just keep doing it over and over again. Is that?
Yeah, part of that, and I also wanted to get into the type of blogging that I'm doing now, which is more spontaneous and not so rigid.
Yeah, where you have to come up with something every day to keep to your plan. Yeah.
And some days I wanted to post more than one picture.
Oh, okay.
Like when, before. And so now with the way that I blog, I can post 20 pictures if I want to.
Yeah. Oh, I can see how there'd be good things about both. That's great. What are some of the challenges that you face in your writing?
Well, you've probably heard of writer's block. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely one where you feel like you should be writing and you even feel inspired to write, but when you go to do it, it's just not there.
Okay. So. Are there ways around that you found to work around that?
Yeah. Sometimes just going and doing something else, even for half an hour, will help.
And then coming back to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes talking with other people about the subject, and sometimes just plowing through it.
Okay.
Even though it's tough, just making yourself put words down, and sometimes it's surprising what will happen once you put the pen to paper or start typing words.
Do you find for yourself in that, you describe it as plowing through, do you find that you just sometimes have to be okay with how it's going to look on the page for a little bit, and just put it out there and you can go back and fix it if it needs to be fixed? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because I find that sometimes too, where I'm not sure what to write, and I think I'm almost scared
Yes.
I don't know why, but I was scared to put it up on the computer screen. Most of the time it is. And sometimes if I just, okay, I'm going to put it out, I can edit it if it sounds bad. And then sometimes I read through it and it really doesn't sound that bad.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if that's how you describe it or not.
Yeah, that's some of it for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other challenges?
Procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
There's those tendencies in me.
Yeah.
Laziness, it really comes down to sometimes.
Yeah. Just don't want to get it done.
And then there's two things that I kind of think are maybe on ends of the spectrum. Not sure. Mediocrity, like being okay with, if I've done something the same for a long time, just being okay with it not being top notch. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other side of being such a perfectionist that I never can do it good enough.
So finding that balance of,
yes,
of putting work into doing the best you can without holding yourself to too high a standard. Is that a way to describe it? Yeah. And
another thing I think about this with the book that I'm currently writing, to get into someone else's story is difficult sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And to do it justice, or to really understand it, or where do you see it? How would you describe the challenge with that?
To do it justice, and I find that since I am such a feeling kind of person, I might put emotion into a certain situation that wasn't there, or I find myself putting myself into the story too much and not the other person's real story.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see how you would have to think about that as someone that didn't experience the story, but having your own stories and ways that you see the world, and trying to do that well. I can see how that would be a thing to work on. So fascinating. Anything else you had there?
Challenges is the time it takes. Writing really takes time.
It does. Yeah. Yeah, very good. Yeah, if you have more to say on any of these things, that's fine if I'm going too fast through them here. But kind of a question I had to wrap this section up is, after this, I guess this would be not always with all of the things that I put down here when the writing process is done, but some of it definitely would be. And I think it's a big part of any art is, so a lot of it happens within us as we come up with the idea and then go through the work of getting it into a medium that it can be viewed or heard. But then there's the reception and other people experiencing the things that we create. So you do a lot of different things, but thinking specifically about writing here. What's been your experience with interacting with others that are experiencing your writing?
So it can be very encouraging to hear from others how my writing has affected them. I wrote a poem called Autographed one time. Started out with how God writes his name on things in nature, and then ends up with the question, have you been autographed by God? And my grade 7 teacher was teaching, obviously, in a different school when I wrote that poem, because this poem I wrote probably, I don't know, close to 20 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe more. And she had her students, I forget what grades they would have been in, but she had them study this poem.
Okay.
And then write me fan mail.
Wow.
And that was an incredible encouragement to me, just to think about if they were high school students. I don't remember their age, but to think about students actually dissecting or studying this poem that I had written and then sending me their comments, what impacted them from it.
Wow.
That was huge.
Yeah.
So that might give you an idea in your teaching.
Yeah.
And I had another lady recently, I wrote an article on fear,
Okay.
and it was published in our church publication magazine. And a lady came to me after this was out for a few weeks and said that article just meant so much to her. I think she said she read it 3 times.
Okay. Wow.
And so those kinds of things can be really encouraging, and it can also be informative. Like, what about that connects with other people?
Yeah.
And so to think about that in future writing as well.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, and it's incredibly encouraging to hear that people are enjoying what you are taking the time to do, and like you said, hearing how they're enjoying or what they're enjoying about it. So that's great. Any others? So other stories from interactions you've had with readers, or other interactions that you have with other people involved in writing, whether it's editors or advisors, that kind of thing.
Well, I would really encourage people to join a writers group if they're into writing. I find that really valuable to have someone else edit my work.
Yeah.
I'm in a group of 4 or 5 other ladies, and we correspond through email.
Okay.
So ideally, once a month, I would send something to them for them to edit. And then I also receive what they write and edit theirs. So that's just a good way to interact with other people who are writing and learn from them.
Are they like mostly encouraging, or do they tell you things that they don't like or things that you should improve as well?
Oh, both.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is valuable to hear both. And they can help to just get you to actually have your writing say what you want it to say.
Yeah.
I find that that's very valuable to hear other people give their ideas and work together, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we only have one perspective of how even something we write, how we don't know how it's coming across to others. So I can see how that's really beneficial.
And you asked about critics here. I would say that I am my own hardest critic.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I haven't had a lot of criticism actually from other people that have read my stuff. And I think that part of it is that I don't write about potentially controversial things.
Yeah.
And so it's the hardest for me when I feel misunderstood by other people. Like that might come through sometimes in what I've written.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess it's hardest. I'm hardest on myself when I don't meet the standard that I would like to meet in perfection in my writing.
Have you had experiences with editors, or so you've gotten some things published, right?
Yes.
So what's that process like, or how has that been?
I haven't done a lot of this in just recent years.
Okay.
I would say that probably what I learned most is to realize that I'm writing for them more than I'm writing for myself.
Okay.
So this is very different when I write something to put on my blog.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to have somebody else saying that I have to do it a certain way before I can put it out. So I think it took me some time to learn that editors they're not the enemy. Like you want to be a team member with them and learn what they want and then work with that.
Okay.
So if that means putting in more mentions of prayer, then I can do that because I know that what I've written is coming from the way I view it. But if that's going to be something that I can do to please them or to enter into their goal, then I can do that.
Okay. So do you feel like you're losing a bit of authenticity when you have to make some of those changes, or is there not really a struggle with that when you're asked to, for something to get published, these changes need to be made?
It can feel like that. I think as an author, you would always have the right to just maybe not use that publisher again if you don't like that. Or it seems like if you think your authenticity is being compromised, then you could do something about that as an author.
Okay.
Either work with the editors to keep that intact, or maybe another time don't send your work there, or
it goes both ways too. Like they have expectations from their readers, and they know what those are, and
exactly,
and so you're having to they have to make decisions on what gets published and what doesn't, and so they're making those choices, and you have to make the choice if you want to meet those or not, I guess, in getting something published.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else that you wanted to say on writing before we move on?
In thinking about myself being my greatest critic, one thing that's been helpful for me to think about is to ask, what do I have to offer to this particular piece of writing or project?
Yeah.
And an illustration that has been helpful for me is to think about, so if I want to give something to someone, if I have it so attached to myself, then in order to give that to someone, I have to send myself with it. And that way, I'm only giving myself to that one person. So if they don't like what I'm offering, that affects me. Like they can reject me because I am so tight to it.
Right.
So then the other way is to, if I don't want to do that, well, then I just won't put any of myself into it.
Right.
And I can't give you something if I'm not attached to it in some way.
Right.
Like I can't, give you an object that's out there in front of me and not affecting me at all. I have to in some way. So the only way I can do it is to offer it. I like to think of it receiving on one hand something and then giving it to someone else by breaking it, maybe.
Okay.
And anyway, when I receive something in one hand and give that to someone with the other hand, it affects my heart as it's going to the other hand. And it's sort of a picture of a cross then, if you think of yourself with both hands out. So that illustration has been helpful to me to think of it in that way, that I have to be broken in order to both receive and to give.
Yeah, very good. Is that something that you came across, or did you come up with that way of describing it yourself? Or
I think I came up with that one for a speaking opportunity I had one time.
Okay, that's very good. Yeah, that's great. If you have other things to say as you think of them about writing, don't be afraid to go back to that. But as you've talked about the ways that you're creative, that you like to be creative, and the ways that you've been blessed with that gift, whether it's through the gifts of God or the experience that you had in your childhood and the way you were raised. And I think it's definitely something that can be passed on to others, and whether it's through inspiration or teaching, I think there are ways to to encourage others to be creative. So I had a few questions for you about that. And you talked about, I mean, you were a teacher, and I feel like you took that love of teaching and skills with teaching. And all throughout my growing up years, I felt like you were a teacher to me in a lot of ways, as well as being my mom, which is great. So what are some of the ways that you bring creativity into your teaching, or the opportunities you have to teach now, or when you were a full-time teacher, ways that you did that?
So I think of object lessons, often using something tangible that students can see really helps. Whiteboard illustrations, charts, outlines, personal stories are a good way to connect. And I find that sometimes having people move physically or get them involved somehow is a good way to teach. And I also thought of being creative in solutions. I think you talked about this maybe a little bit in teaching, like figuring out how to solve a problem maybe or something like that.
Yeah, or look for ways to help a student understand if they're not getting it in the way that you're trying to explain it. Or and I mean, some of the ways that you talked about, whether it's drawing a picture of it if that's possible, or acting something out to demonstrate it, or telling a story. I think all of those can be very helpful in helping get something across that a student's not understanding.
I think about one time I was teaching a class, grade 3 or 4 maybe, and where I would go in and just teach the one class.
Okay, yep.
And there was some problems keeping these students engaged and interested. And I decided to try something where I, throughout the class time, I would make several mentions of a word, and this word was describing an object that I had in a bag.
Okay.
So I came in with this paper bag with an object in it, and told the students that I would be making a few mentions of what's in the bag.
Okay.
And then at the end of class, they could see what's in the bag and see if they were right. And they were supposed to listen for this word.
Yeah, okay, yep.
And so I remember taking a stuffed monkey in one time. And I had to be really creative to think about how to get the word monkey into my teaching a few
So
times.
you try to like slyly incorporate it into your teaching?
Just
okay.
kind of offhand mention or try to bring it into what I was teaching. So that was really fun too.
Yeah, were you able to do it, like to get the word monkey into?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so, and that helped to keep the students engaged, because of course they're going to listen for this odd word that came in every once in a while.
That's great, and it also has the appeal of I don't know did you use a brown paper bag or?
Yeah.
There's just something about a brown paper bag on a classroom that hasn't been opened yet.
I agree.
That keeps everyone wondering what it is, or maybe just sometime just bring in an empty brown paper bag and set it there if you need people to pay attention. No, that probably wouldn't be kind. But yeah, it's a great idea. Anything else that you had thought of there?
No, that's it.
Something else that I would think about in teaching. So if it's one thing to be creative yourself, but how do you teach creativity or encourage others to be creative? Like, think of students here. What are some ways that you can try to bring creativity out of your students?
That can be tricky sometimes. I'm sure you found it that way too. One thing I might try is to just invite response from them, and then picking out, noticing what is in those responses that might be creative that they don't even realize.
Oh, yeah.
Like back to that thing of all of us have something we can offer. Like we've been given something that we can offer.
Yeah.
And maybe the student doesn't realize that he has that certain thing to offer.
Yeah.
So in a discussion, for instance, a teacher can be creative in bringing out from a student's response what they have offered to the group that maybe they don't even realize.
Yeah. Yeah. And just encouragement in general, for students. I mean, I can think back to different times that just a word of encouragement does so much for me. And you can think about that in your own life. And so just taking the time to say a little bit of noticing something that a student did or said, like you mentioned, can I think really encourage that student to try again, to be willing to share or bring out a creative side. So yeah, I think encouragement is huge.
For sure. And with the illustration of it being a discussion, maybe one student, it's even hard for them to say anything at all.
Yeah.
And so for them to offer something by way of speaking words out of their mouth, that might be something that you can point out as, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Even if it was off the wall. Or,
Yeah. Yep. That's great. And along with that, and if you have other things to say on teaching, but I think this goes with it, how, as a parent, did you try to help your children to be creative or to encourage creativity in them? So I think about this now too as a parent, and thinking about, okay, how can I try to foster creativity in my child? So is there ways that you tried to do that, or ways that you did that?
Well, I think you should answer this question.
Well, I might not know what all the things that you tried were, so I was curious about this.
I think to intentionally include my children in my creativity was important. So when I would make a meal for a family who needed it, I sometimes tried to get you to help with that, or at least I remember taking you along to deliver the meal, those kinds of things. I remember getting you to help with decorating cookies, or, making those activity times of connection as a family, I think is a way to start anyway. And as a parent, you have to be okay with messes. Like when you're allowing your children to develop their creativity and you invite them into the process, there's going to be ways that that's done very differently than what you as a parent would do it.
Right.
So you have to be okay with that and let go of your own ways of liking it done.
Okay.
So I remember in some ways I would let you children decorate your own bedrooms. And, some of the posters you had up or whatever certainly would not have been my choice. So as a parent, as a mom, I have to think about this room as this is not going to be necessarily reflecting my own creativity, that I can allow my children to start developing their own.
Yeah. Maybe just on that, do you have to be willing for them to develop different loves or different, enjoy different things and maybe come out at different places than what you did or are where you're at?
Yes, for sure. And I think that's maybe harder for some creative people than others. And I think I could have done better in that, in thinking about how I raised you children.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about when you were describing that, inviting them into the process and kind of being okay with it turning out different than what you had in mind. Like, probably our children aren't going to necessarily have exactly the same hobbies and interests as what we have. And even if you're inviting them into the process, they might not enjoy it or might come up with their own things that ways of doing it than what our own ideas are. So I guess you have to be okay with that to some degree at least.
Mm-hmm. Looking back, do you think there's anything about those times that was helpful to you in developing your own creativity?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to do things and having an encourager, someone encouraging me in doing things was really helpful. And I think I've mentioned that several times on the podcast that having a parent, and I think about this now as even as an adult, that it still means a lot to me to have the encouragement from you and Dad in something that I'm doing, or just whether it's your blessing or encouragement that I've done something well or something like that, still means a lot. And as a child, that was definitely the case, that being encouraged to do things and given the opportunity to try things. So
Yes.
being you signing me up for piano lessons, for example. So I took piano lessons for 5 years and don't really play anymore, but I still think that was incredibly beneficial for me to have that opportunity. Even if I didn't go further than that with it, then basically those lessons, I still am so thankful for the opportunity that you provided for me. And yeah, I want to think about that in my parenting too, that I want to be able to provide opportunities that probably Seth isn't going to want to do all of the things that I provide or opportunities that I provide, but I want him to have those opportunities and to have encouragement to grow and to develop and to be creative, to be the person that God has made him to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think you brought up a point that I was thinking about too, is that parents can use the creativity of others to teach their children.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like in giving you piano lessons, I mean, providing that for you, we did not have that expertise ourselves.
Right.
And so we had a great skilled piano teacher who could share that with you. And so I think it's good for parents to be open to that.
Yeah.
To realize that they're not going to be able to cover every interest and skill that they would like their children to have.
Yeah, for sure. But then to bring that encouraging side, because I remember Dad saying a number of times that something like, "Oh, he just loves the sound of piano music in the morning before he's even out of bed." And so I remember I used to have to get up kind of early sometimes on the day of piano lessons to get my time. And I remember like, oh, he doesn't mind being woken up to my piano playing. Just little things like that are incredibly encouraging in helping to develop those skills and creativity. So,
Right.
yeah. Anything else that you were thinking as ways that you tried to pass creativity on?
I don't think so. I might have a question, though, what you think about something.
Yeah.
So in my childhood, when I had done something creative, often my parents would have me show it to guests when they came or something like that. Or I remember when you children were taking piano lessons, we'd often want you to play a song for someone when they were here.
Right, yeah.
Do you think that that's valuable in developing someone's creativity, or can it be a negative thing?
That's a good question. I would always try to be aware of what a child's, how they're experiencing it, and it could potentially, if it's something that makes them really anxious, and hopefully you know your child well enough to know that about them. But I do think that there's something really valuable in teaching, teaching us to be humble enough to share our gifts. Often we'll kind of hide behind modesty, I think, by saying that, oh, I'm not actually good enough, and we'll try to say that we're being humble in that, and try to display it as humility when maybe it's a fear of being willing to put ourselves out there and being willing to share our talents that we've been given, and yeah. So I think that can be a way to, if it's a way of fighting against the fear of sharing. There's always the balance of doing it for prideful reasons
Right.
and just trying to look really good. But I think for the most part, we're less willing to share when we should be sharing our talents and being willing to put ourselves out there. So I think it was good what your parents did, and what you tried to do with us to put us into situations where we could share our gifts.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's really good. That made me think of the fear of failure thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's been something that in my creativity I have needed to face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just heard a quote recently or read it, something about make fantastic mistakes or make glorious mistakes. And kind of not the idea of go out and make the biggest blooper you can.
Right.
But to be willing to do those fantastic things,
Mm-hmm.
so that if you have a failure in it, you're doing something that's making your particular mark on the world.
Yeah.
And just recently I went to work with Ken for a day with his offshore workers.
Mm-hmm.
We were working on applications for them to return to their country. So they're from Jamaica.
Okay.
Part of this application thing was to put a pin on a Google map of Jamaica of where these guys were going to quarantine.
Oh, okay.
And so when I was asked to help with this process of filling out these forms, I thought, well, what if I make a mistake on it? And especially with this map thing, we're not going to be able to pinpoint exactly on the map where this dwelling is and that sort of thing. But afterwards I thought about, well, what a fantastic thing to be able to do, to sit there with another a person from a different country and be talking about their home area. And, I'm sure I made mistakes on pinning some of those places on the map, but I like to think that it was a fantastic mistake because it was a unique experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. For our last few minutes here, I'm wondering if you have any advice to share from your experience and the things that you've done. So what advice do you have for those that want to develop as a creative person or develop a creative side that they have or want to have?
I think to be curious, to discover what you already have to offer, and then be willing to share that.
Yeah. So being curious about what your skills are and being willing to try different things, or just being curious about the world and wanting to learn more about it, learn new things?
I'd say both those things.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. What advice do you have for those that want to develop their writing?
I'd say do it.
Okay.
To start small, but actually start writing.
Yeah.
And I like to think of a daily exercise of writing as being your exercise bike. Like you can choose what you want that to be, if it's a daily writing in a journal sort of thing, or like the book that I'm writing currently, I try to write at least one sentence a day.
Yeah.
Like more than that, hopefully, but having that, getting on that exercise bike daily is a good idea, I think.
Yeah. I like that analogy use of exercise bike for writing or something like that. I just had this inspiration the other day. And so I'm often throughout the summer, at least I'll be training for a run that a race that I'm going to do, and we'll spend some time running regularly and kind of have that regular discipline going for much of the year. And I've often done that with fitness or sports throughout my life. But I was like, I wonder what would happen if I would, instead of doing an hour of running every morning, what if I would develop my math skills by doing an hour of math every morning, like just have that discipline. I had never really thought about that. Yeah, that is a way that you're not discipline in that isn't limited to just sports or something like that. You could develop something in the mind or like you talked about with writing or something like that. It's that regular exercise of doing it can really help to develop. So I might have to try something like that to develop my math skills.
Yeah, I'd say go for it.
Yeah. Just before we do wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you didn't have a chance to say yet, or anything that you want to promote before we wrap it up?
I was thinking about just emphasizing the value of others in your developing your creativity. So like with my writing, having a group that interacts with me in my writing is very helpful. Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in my writing, you could check out my blog. And that's Danny's Discoveries is the name of it. And I just add that if you comment on my blog, anything I've written, that there's a very good chance that you'll get a reply.
Okay. You like responding to comments that you get? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And then the book about my mom Eva, that I'd mentioned before, there are still some for sale, so you can contact me about that.
What's the title of that?
We Have This Moment.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And hopefully 2021 will be the year for my current book to come out. So you could be watching for that.
Excellent. So you got a goal set for it there.
Yeah.
That's great. You had mentioned the poem that you wrote a while ago that your former teacher had her students.
The autographed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that published anywhere that people could find, or how had your former teacher gotten a hold of it?
It would have been in that publication I was talking about earlier, the Homeschool and School. I have it on my wall.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's something that you should maybe share with people again if you ever put it on your blog or anything like that.
I haven't, but that's a good idea.
That's something to think about doing sometime. I think that you should share that again. So
yeah.
Well, thank you for taking time to think about these questions and responding and sharing from your experience and the things that you've learned. So I've really enjoyed having you on and discussing with you the last little bit.
Yeah, this has been very enjoyable for me too. Thanks for all your urging to get me to come on.
All right. Thanks for doing it.
You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you Mom for sharing your knowledge with us. I've always admired her willingness to share her gifts and to use them to encourage others, and was really glad that she was willing to share her thought process and the things that she's learned from her experience here on the podcast, and to come and join me and talk about these things. So thank you, Mom, for doing that and for sharing all those things with us. If you want to learn more about this episode or other episodes, you can go to the website, everydayexpertise.ca. And if you want to give me feedback or let me know a story that you have about everyday expertise that you've experienced or have yourself, or that you've experienced in talking to others, then send me an email at contact@everydayexpertise.ca. If you want to just share a little bit about the podcast with others, a great way to do that is by using Apple Podcasts. If you are one that uses that with an iPhone or something like that, then they have a nice, easy-to-use rating system where you can give it 1 to 5 stars. And you can also write a review there. Let other people know what you thought of the podcast or what what you like or don't like about it. So it'd be great if you want to give me a rating on Apple Podcasts or write a review for it there. That's all for now. Join me again next week to learn from the expertise of everyday people.